Amendment Bill, third reading.
Call on Government of the Day, Order of the Day number 3.
Interrupted debate on the second reading of the Building Amendment Bill number 4.
Members, the Building Amendment number 4, it was progressed before. At that time, Nikki Wagner had the call. She has 9 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Nikki Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I speak on the second reading of the Building Amendment Bill number 4. And just to recap, this is a companion to the Building Amendment Act 2012, which came into force on the 13th of March 2002. And this is the second of 2 bills to implement the Building Act review. Now, what this bill does is it reduces compliance costs, it reduces complexity, and it reduces the delays in the building process. But it's also about protecting consumers, and it's got a number of provisions that will add to consumer protection. The first is that it makes contractors more accountable. And it makes it more accountable by requiring them to disclose a significant amount of information. Now, the sort of information that they have to disclose to help people make a choice about their contractors is the legal status of the contractor and whether they're operating under a limited liability company. It needs to talk about the people who will carry out the work. It talks about their track record, their dispute history, their skills and their qualifications, and also any financial backup or insurance that they have to cover the cost of fixing faults. It also protects consumers by requiring written contracts for most residential building work. And we heard quite a lot of stories from submitters about really complex situations that had come out of not having a contract that everybody could see, that was in writing, and that they could be sure of the quality of the work they were going to get. So this contract have got to have specific information. First of all, it has to have information about the parties, about dispute resolution, so people do know how they can go about a process if there is a dispute. The process for varying the contract, and one of the stories we've heard, and we probably all know this, is that the costs of varying a contract tend to be very high. Sometimes people believe that a contractor will tender for a job, but if you make any changes to that, that's where they make their money. So there needs to be a process laid out so people understand that. Also, time frame for the contract, basic, but when they know when it will be finished, and what the payment process is. Often disputes are how that payment works out in reality. It also protects the consumers even if the parties do not have a written contract. Now, of course, they're supposed to have a written contract, but just suppose you went ahead and started a building project without a written contract and it all turns to custard. There is regulations in this bill that will prescribe default clauses that will be taken as being included. So there'll be no way for anybody to be able to escape just because it's not in writing. Now, the bill also has specific methods for enforcing warranties. Now, the problem behind this is that often there are warranties, but consumers haven't necessarily read the fine print and they haven't got the peace of mind and if something goes wrong and there is some shoddy building. So this gives specific methods for enforcing those warranties. And building contractors will be expected to fix any defects in their work that are reported within 12 months of completion. So they'll have 12 months to discuss the project, and any damages or any defaults in the work must be fixed by the end of those 12 months. The bill also increases the maximum penalty for failing to comply with building consent requirements. Up until now, it's been a $100,000 fine, but this has been moved to a $200,000 fine just to show how serious we are to make sure that people do get their building consents correctly done and that protects consumers as well. Now, I have to say that the Select Committee worked hard on this bill, and we did make a series of changes and I think improvements in response to submitters' ideas. There's really 4 or 5 key changes, and I'd just like to work my way through that. First of all, there's clarification about who is a building contractor and who is a client. Now, that sounds pretty basic, but you'll be amazed at the number of confusions and disputes that have arisen out of that. There's further detail on the purpose and the content of the checklist. Now, the checklist is an important part of this bill. It means that both the contractor and the client will know what work is expected, and they can work their way through the checklist to make sure that both are delivering on the contract. There's further detail on the content of the mandatory written contracts and how non-complying contracts will be dealt with. So this is the idea that even if your contract is non-complying, there is a process to deal with that. And finally, a new clause outlining what product manufacturers are responsible for under the bill. And it's quite interesting to hear the question from the other side, what's in it for the builders? One of the problems that builders have had trouble dealing with is how much is their responsibility and how much is the product manufacturer's responsibility. So there is a specific part of this bill that will outline what happens if a building product fails, even if the builders have done good work.
Order. The time has come for the House to rise, so this debate is interrupted and set down for resumption next sitting day, and the House will stand adjourned until 2 p.m. on Tuesday the 12th of March 2013. Good evening, everybody.